Hey, my name is Lonnie Ridgway. I'm a former licensing inspector and investigator for the government. I've completed over 300 plus inspection and investigations. All that to say is I know what licensing is looking for. I have really good compliance tips and advice, and that's what I do. I help businesses and facilities do better with their compliance and their operational system. What I want to do is I want to answer some questions from my community. And here's some questions about compliance, about licensing, about things that people want to know from a former licensor and investigator with the government. So here is one. Let me see. I have a bunch of them. Let's see which one is most relevant. Why don't policies alone keep facilities compliant? I'll tell you why. Because policies alone don't keep you compliant. It's implementing the policies that keep you compliant, and it's policies that actually are in alignment with statutes and regulations. You can have the greatest policies in the world, but if your staff aren't implementing them, then they're just good paperweights. Here's another good question. What does licensing notice in the first 5 minutes? In the first 5 minutes, licensing notices safety risks and cleanliness. First of all, odors. That's not necessarily on the licensing inspection checklist report that I did as a former licensor, but I noticed that right off the bat. Was it stinky outside? What was the odor, the smell like inside? Second thing was safety concerns. I lived in a place that snowed. I'm a pretty stout, athletic guy. If I had an issue walking up the stairs or slipping on the sidewalk, I promise you, vulnerable adults would have issues as well. Safety and concerns, I was definitely the number one. Another thing that I noticed within the first 5 minutes of whether or not if staff was competent, I usually went out of my way to ask staff a question just to test their competency. Here's another question. What causes inspectors to ask more questions? Red flags. Red flags causes inspectors to ask more questions. Here's a perfect example of a red flag. I remember walking to a facility, and the facility had a lock on the fridge. That's the first thing I saw when I went into the kitchen. They had a lock on the fridge. Immediately, I'm going to ask questions. And here's the thing. It's not necessarily that there's a lock on the fridge, but I'm having all these questions. Why is there a lock on the fridge? Is there documentation to prove that there needs to be a lock on the fridge? Are all the clients, are they restricting food from the clients? Are the clients getting their food? And I probably wouldn't have asked all those questions unless I saw that lock on the fridge. And there might be a perfectly good reason why there's a lock on the fridge. But that lock put up a red flag. So red flags, when licensing sees a red flag, they're going to dig and they're going to ask more questions. Well, a good licensor should. Here's another good question. What questions does licensing ask staff? When I was on site, I would usually ask staff a couple questions to test their knowledge about the facilities and test their knowledge about their facility's operational system. One of the questions I would ask was regarding the emergency evacuation procedures, just to see if they know it. Every staff should know that. I would also ask a question specifically about a client's plan of care. And honestly, I didn't really necessarily care if the staff actually knew the plan of care and what the plan of care stated. What I wanted to know, that if they didn't know the answer to that question, they know where to get it. I can't tell you how many times when I ask a staff a question about a plan of care and they go, oh, I don't know, and then they didn't know where to get it. That's a red flag. That's an issue. There's some facilities that have 100 plus beds. I don't expect the staff to know all 100 of the plan of cares of every single client in that facility. But what I do expect staff to know is where to go get the information about the plan of cares. There should be a place where all the files are kept, whether it's an electronic file system or whether it's a cabinet. But when I ask about, hey, client C, what is his XYZ? The staff should not know it if they don't know it. They should be able to go a place, open up a binder and say, oh yeah, it's this right here. That's what I want to know. I want to know that the staff that is working is competent and that the staff is prepared to render the services that the client needs to be healthy and safe. Simple as that. Here's a great question. Why do staff training systems matter? They matter because you're caring for vulnerable adults. If you drop something in the training gap with the staff, that could lead to the death or that can lead to a client getting hurt. I've seen the worst training systems for staff. As a matter of fact, when I consult facilities, this is what I usually see. I usually see facilities doing an annual training for about 16 hours at a time, right? They do this big powwow, they get everybody fed, they put everybody in the conference room, and they go over all the policies, and they go over that's a bad way to train. You know what a great way to train is? To chop up policies or chop up trainings in small bite-sized pieces. For example, Maybe you have 26 policies. If you have 26 policies, then you could train a policy or do a training on a policy every other week for the entire year and just repeat that cycle. It addresses all the policies. It addresses all the policies, and you can even double up sometimes, right? That's better, and that's much better, and staff will get that much more ingrained versus just sitting them in a room and training all the 26 policies in a 3-hour span or a 16-hour span. And then how you train staff. With the different types of platforms that there are today, there is no reason why you can't think outside the box and create good trainings. For example, podcasting is free. One of the coolest ways I've seen staff train is it's a corporation. The corporation has a closed podcast for their members, for their staff, right? And they log on and they listen to these podcasts. And on these podcasts, they're talking about the individual policies. And then they also have little like nuggets or highlights from the administrator or the owner that they want the staff to know about the policies. And the staff listen to them and they check off that they listen to them. That's a great training tool, a great training platform, great training system. Here's another great question. How do inspectors evaluate policies? Inspectors evaluate policies by ensuring that the policies are in alignment with the governing statutes and regulations. You can have a great policy that sounds good, but if it's not in alignment with the statutes and regulation, your policy is out of compliance, and you're actually teaching staff to operate in a way that is out of compliance. As a former licensing inspector and investigator, I also looked at policies to see if they actually made sense and they can be followed, and if there's any gaps. This is a great question. What happens if services aren't documented? If services aren't documented, it's as if the services never occurred. I want you to understand this. Documentation is the single most important thing that will protect your facility and your business and your pocketbook. I can't tell you how many times I've seen facilities have to pay back hundreds of thousands of dollars because even though they probably did render the services, they did not document the rendered services correctly, or they didn't have any documentation of the rendered services at all. You have to document everything that you do. A scraped knee, document how you address that. If they have goals, objectives, you have to document how you're meeting those. You have to document how staff is assisting them with their ADLs. You have to document everything. Document their transportation. Document how you assisted them. Document how you turned them. Document their behaviors. Document how you help them. Document how you encourage them. Document. How can facilities reduce inspection stress? Facilities can do this by making sure that they're prepared, right? A lot of times it seems as if facilities just wait to about a couple days before the inspection takes place. The inspection has been scheduled, they know it, but they wait just a couple days before and then they start getting everything in order. Have everything already in order. Have an operational system where files are constantly being reviewed and audited internally and being updated when you need them. Make sure that employee files are being updated. Make sure you have a training system. Make sure your documentation correctly. Make sure you have a system to clean. If you have these operational systems in place, you won't stress during inspections. Matter of fact, you won't have to worry about stressing during inspection. You just it's just any other day. You won't be nervous for licensing to show up. You should operate your facility in such a way that whether it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, whether it's next week or whether licensing is scheduled or not, you should have the same mentality for when licensing shows up. If they show up, they show up. If they don't, they don't. It doesn't bother you. It doesn't matter to you because all your operational systems are in place. You haven't anything to worry about. What causes licensors to ask more questions? Red flags. What are red flags? Things that just seem out of place. Things that just seem out of compliance. Gut feelings. Things that you might say, things that you might do, a way that a client reacts, something that a staff does not know. All of these things can scream red flags. A good licensor, when they see a red flag or hear a red flag, they're going to dig deep and ask more questions. How do good facilities stay compliant year after year? And it's true, a lot of good facilities, They have great inspections year after year. They have, I keep saying this is the key word, they have great operational systems. They have great documentation systems. There's not chaos. They have systems like what's going on in the facility from 8 to 11, what's going on in the facility from 11 to 2. The medication administration is the same every single time. They do meals the exact same every single time. There's routine, there's consistency, there's operational systems. The best facilities have adopted operational systems that work for them. Here's a great question. What compliance risks are never overlooked? I would say having the right staff. In every single state, there's barrier crimes, which means that if your staff has this barrier crime for whatever it is, that they cannot provide or render services, that they should not be hired. That is never over. That is taken so seriously from licensing and from the government. And it's so serious that if you have a staff who has a barrier crime, but you've hired them anyway, and they rendered services, that the services that they rendered usually is paid back if there's an investigation that takes place and they find that they are out of compliance. That this staff was rendering services and left alone with clients that they shouldn't have been rendering services. You might have to pay back those hundreds of thousands of dollars. I've seen that happen. Why do facilities hire the wrong people? That's another great question. Some facilities get in a bind. If you've been in this industry long enough as an owner or operator, there's going to come a day where somebody called in sick or you had to fire somebody, and then all of a sudden you have to fill that position because you're caring for people 24/7. And so staffing is huge. And so sometimes, I've seen this a lot as a former licensor. I've been guilty of this as a facility owner. I've hired somebody who on paper met the qualifications, but we know good and well that they shouldn't have been working. But I needed a body. What should I have done in that scenario as a facility owner? I should have not taken the staff. I should have incentivized with overtime, incentivized with extra pay. I should have stepped in. I should not have just taken somebody just because I needed a body. That is the wrong thing to do. Or facilities hire wrong people because they have the wrong people doing the hiring. That's something that needs to be addressed. I can't tell you how many times that I've helped a facility out, but the people who they have in charge of hiring are hiring friends and hiring family members. And their friends and their family members have no business working in that facility. They have no business working in that industry. They are not the type of people that you want them working in that industry. Not to say that they're not qualified. It's to say that they don't have the personality, they don't have the patience, they don't have the kindness or the warmth to provide services to vulnerable adults. They don't have the attention to detail that it takes. Another tip that I have for hiring, hire slow, fire fast. Here's the last question that I'll take. How often should compliance trainings occur? Pretty often, consistently. There should be a schedule, and they should just continue that schedule for the life of the facility, for the life of that business, whether that's once a month, every other week, because compliance is always changing. And then you have new people with different perspectives, and you have different situations and different scenarios, especially in this industry, because there's always a rotating and revolving door of staff. It seems like this industry has the biggest staff turnover rate in all the industries. Maybe you think about it like, I'm going to have this staff for 3 years. And then I'm going to have another staff for 3 years. If you just think like that and then understand, man, compliance training is such a big deal. I need to make sure it's at top of mind. All right, that's what I got for you today. Once again, my name is Lonnie Ridgway. I'm a former licensing and investigator for the government. I've inspected over 300 plus facilities, ranging from 100 plus bed facilities all the way down to 2 client residential group homes. I know what licensing is looking for. I want to make these compliance conversations sexy because compliance conversations gets boring. So if you enjoyed this content and this is valuable to you, like, subscribe, share it with somebody, and follow for more.